If you're watching this in the VLE or you're floated by on YouTube, a very warm welcome. My name is Rory Lees-Oakes and today we're looking at 3 therapies compared. If you want a more detailed explanation of the therapies discussed in this presentation, check out the following presentations available on this channel, and there's an introduction to transactional analysis, an introduction to rational emotive behavioural therapy. There's also an introduction to person-centered therapy. Watch those first and then you will get a better idea of the therapies that I'm speaking about in this presentation and how they work in practice. The aim of the presentation is to form a supplemental study guide for students undertaking the Certificate in Counselling Concepts Level 2 or the Certificate in Counselling Skills Level 3. The first therapy we're going to look at is transactional analysis. It was invented by Eric Berne, or developed by Eric Berne, and it comes from the psychoanalytical school of psychology. Now, when we talk about psychoanalytical school, we're not talking about a school building, we're talking about a school of thought. And I think it's good at this point to say there are lots of different therapies and it's the best fit for clients. One client will suit one therapy better than another, and there's no overall therapy that is seen as complete. Research says that, as I said before, it's best fit for client. So psychoanalytical school is developed from the thinking of Sigmund Freud and Freudian ideas. It's an active directive therapy, so the therapist would teach the client the mechanism of the therapy and also teach them where their distress was coming from and the way it needs to be approached to affect, for want of a better word I guess, a cure for it. The core conditions, and we touch on this in other videos, of empathy, congruence and unconditional positive regard, being genuine, being empathic, being non-judgmental on the part of the therapist, well, they're desirable, and we would hope that any therapist would show those that way of being, of empathy, being genuine, and also being non-judgmental. The focus in this therapy is how we communicate, and sometimes when we communicate not very effectively, and sometimes what we hear from people can put us into non-resourceful states where we're trapped in childhood thinking, or maybe we're very parental and we talk to people like with their parents, and that might not feel very good from the other person's point of view. There's homework in this therapy, so again the client would be asked to think about how they're behaving, how they're interacting with people, and then come back the next week and speak with the therapist on what they've done, how they've altered, if you like, their behaviour. The key idea here is ego states, and if you watch the other videos you'll see that it's parent, adult and child. Sometimes we're in a parental ego state where we're acting out and speaking like we were spoken to when we were children by our parents. We may be adults, in which case we're accepting of what other people say, even if we don't necessarily agree. And in a child ego state, we're living in thoughts and feelings generated from when we were children and perhaps weren't powerless. Rational multi-behavioural therapy is the next one, and it's developed by Albert Ellis. It's the behavioural school of psychology, so the behavioural school of thinking. It's an active directive therapy, so again the therapist teaches the model of therapy to the client. The core conditions that we talked about of genuineness, being empathic and not being judgmental on behalf of the therapist, they're desirable. The focus is on changing perception. So it may be some people have irrational thinking, maybe somebody may have had a car crash, feels that they're a terrible driver, can't drive again, and the therapy asks them to kind of challenge, is that accurate thinking or is that irrational thinking? And if it's irrational, what can you do to alter it? Again, there's homework. So clients may be asked to take on tasks or do things that actively challenge these irrational thoughts and the feelings that go with them. So we mustn't forget that. Sometimes irrational thinking can generate feelings, almost all the time it does, and it's about challenging the feelings as well as the thinking. And the key idea is irrational beliefs. So it may be again that someone has a very fixed idea of things that's causing them distress, and the therapist gently challenges them and asks them to consider, is their thinking rational? Is it provable against what we know? So again, something like someone flying, they may feel that it's very dangerous, and the therapist may actually say, well, technically speaking, statistically speaking, it's safer than driving, and can show them the evidence. The final therapy is person-centered therapy. It was invented by Carl Rogers, and it's the humanistic school of psychology. Humanists believe that people are basically good, and that they are interested in personal growth, that we all have the ability to grow personally. It's a non-directive therapy, so here we see an immediate difference. There's no direction in this therapy. Clients aren't given homework or told the model. They're given a environment, a space which they can discuss their issues in a safe, non-judgmental and warm way from the therapist, so they don't feel threatened, and they can explore who they are and what they want to change. In this therapy, the core conditions aren't desirable, they're necessary and sufficient. In other words, they're the everything within the therapy. And the focus on this therapy is the relationship between the client and the counsellor, not the techniques. The focus is on self-acceptance. So it's not particularly trying to change people, it's about trying to get people to accept themselves and accept their view of the world. This doesn't mean that counsellors collude with people who have irrational beliefs, but it does mean that they ask them to think about where they came from. There's no homework in this therapy. So in this therapy, clients are just asked to kind of reflect on the therapy and the session. And the key idea here is organismic valuing yourself, valuing your experience. I'm just going to go on to the graph here and just go through a few compare and contrast. Here we have the core conditions are desirable, they're the same. Clients and counsellors' techniques are the same, and they work in the here and now. So have a look at the highlighted text, and they're the things that are the same. The things that are different are not in highlighted text. So if you're constructing your assignments, there's an opportunity to just see the differences. You're comparing and you can contrasting. The comparisons are in bold. Finally, there are many different forms of therapy. The general consensus, as I've said before, is best fit for client. One approach will not suit all clients, and if you're seeking therapy or need advice to make an informed choice, contact the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. They can be found on the web at www.bacp.co.uk, by the telephone on 01455 883 300, or at info@bacp.co.uk if you're sending them an email. If you want further information, if you're watching on the VLE, if you click the resource tab above the red arrow, it'll download a printed graph of the comparisons and differences that we saw in the presentation. And finally, thank you for watching.